Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Dairy Signal. Today, we are joined by Mike Immel and Mike Wetstein from Rural Mutual Insurance Company, and we will be talking about all things farm insurance. Before we do get started, I do want to remind you that this is a live program, so use that opportunity to ask your questions. To do so, you can click the three dots in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen, and as always, that continuing education quiz will pop up at the end of the episode. With that, Mike, both of you, I'm going to let you jump in with an
Okay.
intro before we get started.
All right. Yeah, thanks for giving me the opportunity to spend some time here talking about farm insurance. I've been doing this for 45 years. I was raised on a dairy farm, so I know dairy. I know the industry. Started doing this when I was 24, so it tells you about how old I am. But it's been a good run. My specialty was insuring farms. The company I'm with, I've been with them that long, and I've been loyal. And farming is a great community to be involved with. They're trusting, loyal people, and they work hard. And I'm happy to be part of the industry. Mike, associate here. I've been here 45 years, so I'm in the process of replacing myself. Mike's been with us, 3 years, Mike?
Yeah, I've been here for 3 years. My background before this, I came from education, worked in high schools for a while as a math teacher. My family farms kind of phased out by the time I started coming up, but worked on a lot of surrounding family farms, more in the general labor aspect, and got my education that way, unloading hay, picking stones, and milking some cows. So that's my upbringing.
That sounds very familiar to myself, that's for sure. What made you want to make the switch from high school math to insurance?
It's a good question. I grew up in Eden, so it's a small ag community, and teaching was really great. But my wife's a teacher as well, and there came a time where one of us needed to make a change elsewhere. And a friend of mine said, "Hey, why don't you come try out working here? We work with farms in the area. You might enjoy it." And I haven't really looked back since. It's been a really great 3 years to get started.
All right, just to add to that, I've been basically trying to replace myself for the last 10 years. So Mike isn't the only associate here. There's Bob Beneke, Sean Andrew, and Eric O'Brien, and my son Matt as financial advisors. So we've got a pretty good staff here that can handle all insurance needs out of the office here.
Awesome. Well, with that, I say we jump into our first kind of topic of discussion or question that I have for you guys is how have farm risks changed over the years, and what are the biggest insurance gaps you're seeing on dairy farms today?
All right, I'll touch base on how the farms have changed. Back when I started in '82, definitely I was on a farm. We milked 120 cows, did shifts, that type of thing. So back then, that was kind of the norm. As we've evolved throughout the years, obviously the farms, still family farms, have changed. They've had to grow due to all the requirements as far as staying competitive. They've evolved from small sustaining operations into large-scale businesses, basically, and roughly 97% of all U.S. farms are still family-owned farms. But they had to modernize. They had to consolidate a lot of things. Economic pressures have forced them to shift from their traditional roles to necessitating formal business structures such as LLCs, corporations, things like that. So they've grown substantially. Rather than just the family working on the farm, it's employees. They have had to find different avenues of income, such as meat sales, that type of thing. As far as the risks that have changed, it was a lot simpler back then because of the size of the farms. Things have really dramatically changed because of the complexity of them. And as far as the demands that are the gaps we see is that when we do farms is basically there's several of them, and I'll let Mike kind of touch on a few of those, and we'll kind of have a conversation about those.
Yeah, I'll segue off of Mike too. I think family farms is such a great description of what farming is, and at the same time, family farms are turning into commercial operations in some regard, I think. So ensuring those correctly is important. When it came to some of the gaps that came to mind, business income was one of the first ones, and protecting cash flow when something does happen. So you have a major building go down with livestock in it. What do we do? What happens if we can't milk for a week, months, whatever that takes for a rebuilding phase? Property values and keeping buildings and equipment properly insured so that when you do have a loss, you're not having to cough up additional dollars to rebuild or replace equipment.
I'll just jump in here quick. So back to the business income, back many years ago, business income wasn't even a consideration for dairy farms to have. So bottom line is that when you talk about income. They thought about buying disability insurance because if I got disabled, I had to replace myself to do the work. Now it's point being is that if you have a major fire, like Mike said, or a tornado come through, you're going to need that cash flow. If you've got 2,000 cows that aren't producing, that business income is probably, I think, the biggest important coverage on a farm policy to make sure you can keep that sustaining that business income as is. And property values, Mike talked about those. That is, in the last 10 years, that has really skyrocketed. If you know anything about actual cash value, replacement cost coverages, a lot of people run into problems where they can't rebuild. Mike's got some examples of, in the situation where that comes into play and how to insure buildings and why you want to insure certain buildings for replacement and actual cash value.
Yeah, that's its own conversation. We should probably have after this. I'll just hit on some other topics too that I thought were important too. So liability exposures are changing. More farms are having visitors on them for educational days. We're talking about more custom operators showing up, more consultants, you name it. We've got more outside people coming onto farms every day. Workers' comp and employee practices. So I guess knowing when you have to have it, why you have to have it, and then how to apply it so that it works for you. It should be a resource for you and for your employees. It's kind of a two-way street is how I try to view workers' comp. And then I would say some of the more cutting edge bits is cyber risks as we get into it. So there's more and more dairies with robotic equipment. They've got a lot of their payroll data online too as well. So making sure those parts are properly covered is such an important part of today's dairies.
Yeah, I have a few large dairies. I've had conversations about, what if for some reason we can't milk cows because we're hooked up to the internet. So, when you got robotic milkers, that type of thing, that's a concern to start thinking about. It's something we never had in the past. So, it's going to become more of an issue at this point in time. It's just getting started. The other thing you talked about was custom farming. So, I had a conversation with a farmer this morning. Okay, I had a guy come over. He was chopping hay and he ran a stone through his unit. He had $100,000 damage. How can we pay for that? I said, well, you can't pay for that. He's an independent business owner. He needs to buy his own insurance. He's responsible for that. But we feel responsible. We like to help out. The point being is that would have to be covered by the custom contractor. It's important to get certificates of insurance from those contractors so that you have proof they have coverage so that it doesn't come back to you. And just a quick note on that is if you don't have a certificate of insurance and they don't have insurance, something happens, it could come back on your workers' comp if one of the employees got hurt, which is really going to affect your experience amount, that type of thing. So it's important to have certificate of insurance for anyone that does work for you to verify they have coverage, and probably list your farm as an additional insured on that policy to protect yourself with another layer of coverage.
That's a great point about the custom contractors and providing certificates of insurance. I guess I would have never thought of that either. One question or something that I did want to jump back to that was mentioned was cash value versus replacement cost. And we can get into that later if you wanted, but maybe touching on a little bit of the description and maybe give it to me in plain terms, what each one means and what we can do to get the best value.
I think as long as it's forefront, let's discuss it.
Yeah.
I think it's important to actual cash value. Years back when farmers were smaller or whatever, they'd insure that barn's worth $50,000. I'll put $50,000 on. So what happens if you have a loss and it's not insured for replacement costs, you'll get penalized for not having enough coverage on that building. So that being a situation with old barns, small barns, the replacement factor that comes in is you've got these large buildings, these freestall barns, parlors, big complex, whatever. If a tornado comes through and you have it insured for $2 million and you built it 10 years ago, it's going to cost you $8 million to put that back up today. You're insuring at $2 million. You have an actual cash value policy. So that means you're going to barely get, the amount you had insured for. Replacement cost is huge. Like I said, the last 10 years, it really has evolved. So we need to make sure when we do our reviews, which we do, is go out there with an EDA value, which is a valuation cost guide that'll say, this is what your building costs today to put up. This is what your insurance needs to be at. If you choose not to go that, then we need you to sign a piece of paper, because otherwise after the fact, we want to make sure we're all on the same page. If you don't care about replacement costs, then you need to understand how it's going to be handled when a claim happens.
Right.
And yeah, and then
yeah, I think I think when you're deciding on a building value and you say, yeah, I don't want to go replacement cost because boy, it's going to cost, like Mike said, maybe it's 8 million. We know the premium's going to go up due to that. That's fine if you've got a total loss in a building. Well, whatever your limit is, you're probably going to get paid out that amount. One of the bigger issues is when you have a partial loss on a building then at that point. So if you're not insured to within a certain percentage of what today's replacement cost of that building is, well, if you have a partial loss, you're only going to get paid out a partial amount of that claim. So an example might be, Mike gave a good one, a building that's insured at $2 million, but worth $8 million. Well, you're insured at about 25% of that building's cost. So if you had a partial loss that costs maybe $500,000 to repair, they're only going to pay out 25% approximately of that partial loss. So that's some of the dangers you can play when you're between that replacement cost and actual cash value number.
And nowadays there's ways, there's cost containment type things where you can take a look at, okay, I need to be at this amount because I'm going to continue the operation. What can I do to keep the cost down? Higher deductibles, make sure everything's in line as far as inspections go with risk. We have risk inspectors go out to check the risk out, make sure everything is taken care of, safety things are followed, that type of thing. That'll help the company maybe give you some relief on your rate if you're working with the insurance company to keep things safe and up to date on it. So that can help too. But you really need to look at the other thing is how much risk can you afford to handle?
Right.
What's your risk tolerance? I'm willing to accept, is it 25,000, 50,000, that type of thing. Have that conversation with your insurance agent, determine what it is and get your buildings up where they need to be.
Awesome. Thank you. One more thing before we jump to the next question. We talked about cyber risk at the end there a little bit. Could you guys maybe go into a little bit more detail on what you're seeing come from that as far as cyber risk and what you guys can do to help mitigate that risk?
It's always been an issue. It's always been a coverage. We've always offered it. We've always had minimal coverage on it. But now it's becoming a bigger concern because of the fact that everything's going to be connected to the internet. What happens if we get shut down? We have to pay a ransom so we can milk our cows again. How do we pay for that? That's going to be a cyber exposure. So that's the biggest concern that I see on it. The other thing is if you have employees or vendors you work with, someone would hack your system. You got to make sure you have some type of cyber coverage to get that all reinstated and back to the original form if it did happen. But now going forward with the larger dairies and everything being connected to the main internet or whatever type thing, how is that going to play into the future of these dairy operations?
Right.
And that cyber policy will give you some coverage to help pay that ransom fee or help replace that loss of income, that type of thing.
Got it. Awesome. Alrighty. Now we're going to jump a little bit into, you mentioned a little bit ago, reviews, and that's kind of where we're going to go next. So the question is, help producers evaluate whether their insurance coverage reflects their current operation by walking through a few common scenarios. If a producer hasn't reviewed their policy in several years, what are the first things they should look at?
Sorry with that, Mike.
Sure. I guess I'd start like anything, like ground zero. If I'm walking into a new farm today, I don't know who you are yet, and I haven't really evaluated you. I think you start first on the liability exposure that you have present. I guess first, how much liability insurance do we need, right? And keep it within reason. We don't want to go broke on insurance, but where do we need to be? What's an appropriate limit to be at? And then after that, let's talk about what exposures you actually have. It's some of the components we already talked about, but it's thinking about your general liability. Where do you actually have risks on the farm? Thinking about the condition and workplace and what that looks like. How can we best mitigate the liability exposures you have for your employees or people who are out on the farm? That's part of our on-site visit process, is helping farmers identify that, because you get new people to come in and say, oh, that gate over there is not being held up real well, right? So I guess there's that part first, and just having fresh eyes on the place. After that, it's okay, who's here? How are they covered? Mike talked earlier about certificates of insurance. So if you hire a custom manure hauler, are you gathering a certificate from them to maintain that they have their own liability coverage so that if they come on your premise, either damage some of your equipment or they get hurt themselves, that they have the correct coverage in place, not that the farm's going to be on the hook for something that really shouldn't be handled by you, honestly. So there's that part of it. And then there's visitors as well. So I talked a little bit about educational opportunities where I think farms are doing a great job of bringing people out to the farm. And at the same time, it's like, are we good if somebody gets hurt here or not? So about 10 years ago, Wisconsin Act 269 was enacted. That is basically a recreational immunity law for farmers that says, hey, if you have visitors coming on site as an educational opportunity or something else, a breakfast on the farm, it says, hey, they're welcome to be here. The farm's not going to be liable if somebody gets hurt due to uneven terrain or general conditions of what a farm is like, or a cow acting out, right? And somebody gets hurt due to that. Basically, it just says, due to normal conditions of a farm, we can't be held liable by bringing people out here. There's some conditions that go with that. You have to have the right signage up. I'll send that to you, Haley, so you can include that in the notes page and give the website that describes that a little bit. But it's a great resource, a great peace of mind to say, hey, yeah, let's continue bringing people out because they need to know what farms are like today. As people maybe don't have as much opportunity now as they did 10, 15, 20 years ago. So I think that's important. After we look at that, we should definitely talk about pollution coverage. A lot more manure that needs to get moved off of a farm, and then we're storing a heck of a lot more on site now than ever before. So how is that covered? Who's covering it? Is it us? Is it somebody else that's shipping it out of here?
That's why I mentioned just quick. He mentioned about liability insurance for any subcontractors that are hauling manure for you. There's general liability in case someone gets hurt, but then there's pollution liability. So when you have a certificate of insurance, you need to make sure that pollution liability box is checked so that if he's hauling it and they spill it, they're the primary one for liability coverage. It can still come back to the farmer because it's his manure or their manure. But again, pollution on that certificate of insurance is huge to check that. I'm sorry to jump in there. What we're talking about?
Yeah, no, you're good. So those are, it's multi-layered, right? It's not, it goes down a long list of what we need to look at and evaluate when we sit down at the kitchen table or the office, wherever we're at, to look at what's important. Once we go through the liability parts and start to sew those up and make sure we're well protected, then we're going to start looking at physical damages. And I think you start by looking at what buildings are generating the most revenue for you, what equipment is, where your animals are at, what those values are at. So you start to work down your physical exposures, what needs to be protected, how are we going to protect it, what deductible structure are we going to apply, yada, yada, yada. And then income after that. It's the third in the list, but it kind of comes after those because you start to piece together where your income is coming from when you talk about liability, when you talk about physical exposures.
Just an example from the spring, we had that major snowstorm. I believe it was in April. Yep. We had a lot of snow, so the milk trucks couldn't get out to pick up the milk. So we're getting calls from farmers. All right, I got to dump my milk. Who's going to pay for this? Unfortunately, there's no coverage that's going to pick that up. I mean, there's no insured peril that covers the fact that there was a snowstorm and the milk hauler couldn't get out to get it. So that was and there's some other things that come up too, that insurance doesn't cover everything, but things like that happen. And in all my years of doing this, I never thought to discuss that. It's never happened in the past. So again, be wary with the storms we're having. Things happen. Insurance may not cover everything.
Right. Yeah. Awesome. I actually am going to jump in with two questions that I have for you, talking about insurance reviews and what you guys kind of go through when you're either bringing on a new client or looking at an existing. I'm kind of thinking, or my question is if you have a existing customer that's been with you for a long time and you're aware of the operation, you've been with them, how often do you do an insurance review with them to go over coverage changes and value changes? And what can producers do to better prepare for those meetings with you? What information do they need to bring in to make that meeting go smoothly?
Okay. I've been doing this a long time. So basically reviews are my big, I hang my head on my reviews because I love going to see my farmers. And when I go out there, it's not about talking about the neighbors, everybody else, about getting the work done. So bottom line is I prepare before I go out there. I have a list of their loss history, showing them how many claims they've had over the last few years, not to make them feel bad, but just say, hey, when it comes to pricing, my job is to try to get you the best price we can. But when we have these claims, we have to be wary of that and be safety conscious. I'll take along their workers' comp information, their experience mod, all the information that we've had history-wise to let them know how they've been doing over the last 15, 20 years and where we're at today and where we want to be in the future. So that general information I bring with me. What they really need to have is basically just an updated list of their inventory, machinery, cattle. What improvements have they done throughout the years? Have they added through the year, added on, that type of thing? But in general, I would say I review every farm, every business I have once a year. It has to be done just for the simple fact that you need to do it to stay on top of things. Because every time I go out there, we forgot to call you and tell you we had this tractor on. We got 800 more cows. We never thought about it. So things like that that's why you have to get in front of the client. And you owe it to them. They're paying these big premiums to you, or premiums, big, small, or whatever. Our job is to be out in front of them, make sure we're protecting their best interest at heart. So then I'll sit down, we'll go through the policy, we'll go through and just kind of lay the policy out saying, here's your liability coverage, here's your acreage. I mean, how much acreage do you have? Any additional acreage? It's important to keep your acreage up to date. Liability premiums based on the number of acres you work. So the insurance company wants to have that. Talk about the pollution liability. And then we talk about the endorsements, agribusiness endorsement, agritainment endorsement, milk contamination, things like that. And then we get into the building coverage. Start with the house, and we talk about replacement cost, value of the home, that type of thing. Then we get into the farm personal property, go over the inventory list, and then we get into the buildings, and then the rec fees, and then the liability coverage. So that's the first step of it. And then we get into the workers' comp coverage, and we get into the business auto coverage, and all of that ties together. So a good review is going to take a good hour, but it's something that needs to be done. And you need, basically, I cover every line of it. So Mike's fairly new at it. He's been 3 years into this. He's starting his reviews now. So if you got something you need to add on that, Mike, because I'm old school, you're new school, tell him what you got.
Yeah, I do think that Mike's done a great job as far as been here for a long time. He knows what he's doing. So I try to learn as much as I can. A human sponge off of him a little bit. But having those reviews is massively important. Being on site is massively important. The annual review is the time to come together and make sure we're all good. But at the same time, there's 364 other days in the year, and there's a lot changing on a farm in those 364 days. So we got to make sure that line of communication is open, whether it's from insured to us or to our office, whoever that needs to be. Those lines need to be established really well, so the communication's ongoing. Equipment's going to get picked up and it's not going to get talked about for a month, right. But we got to make sure we're doing our best to stay on top of that.
He mentioned that he was saying communication is huge. I mean, it's I probably talk to my large dairies two dozen times a year, if not more than that. It's just basically you're going to have a lot going on. There's a lot of moving parts, so it's important to stay in touch, texting, whatever it is. Get your when you have your appointment, just let's say, hey, this is how we're going to communicate. This is when you can get me. This is who you call, that type of thing. So it's up to us to lay that format out for our customers so they're aware of it. Another thing in review, you talk about business continuity. So I mean, that loss of income we talked about, extra expense, and then basically crop insurance. Do you need multi-pro crop insurance? Do you need hail insurance? That type of thing. Dairy revenue protection program. You need insurance now to protect your revenue for the DRP program. So I mean, that's all evolved throughout the years because of the size of the dairy. So there's a lot going on. We don't handle the multi-pro crop, and we don't handle DRP. That's more of a specialized market, but some agents do and we don't. It's just feel like we need to focus on the farms, take care of that. And the other thing basically is how many more years are you going to farm? You're going to sell the farm? Do you have a child interest in the farm? Are you working on estate planning? That type of thing. All of that comes into that review, and you catch all that, encompass all that in that one review when you sit down and talk about it. And then throughout the years, you go back and the farm evolves and grows. And then that's when you start doing the estate planning. That's when you start doing the buy-sell agreements, things like that. So it all comes with that initial visit where you sit down and have a conversation with the individual, ask questions. And A lot of times I'll drive in the yard. It's like, when did that building go up? It's like, oh, we forgot to tell you. It's like, okay. So I mean, things like that, because you're busy. These guys are busy doing their thing day in and day out. We all have our careers and that type of thing, but they have a lot of moving parts, and our job is to make sure that we're there in front of them to get this stuff insured properly and keep it current.
Awesome. That makes sense. So at least once a year, but always keeping open communication between the farmer and insurance agent to make sure there's nothing missed. Um, Next question revolving around employee injuries. I know there's a couple points that we wanted to go over there, so I'll let you guys start with that.
I'm going to let Mike take that one. I talked a little bit in the last one, but
yeah. I think this is a good point from transitioning again from family to we're operating business. We got employees here. So I think that happens organically. You go from 1 to 2 to 3 to all of a sudden you've got 20 employees that are showing up on a daily basis. So making sure that you're mapping out what happens when somebody gets hurt. Does everybody know who to go to and how to go about reporting an injury? So it's, as much as we've got our relationship that we talk about with farmers, those relationships on site are so important come work claim time and come injury time. So I guess what we say is there's a couple of things, and I'll hit on it between them. But I guess first off, making sure your employee's taken care of. If they need to go to the doctor immediately, make sure we're jumping on that right out the chute. Securing the scene, making sure nobody else is getting hurt. And then after that, it's reporting time. So there's a first notice of loss document that needs to be filled out and kind of describes who, what, where, when, why. That gets sent into your agent or your agency, and then the adjuster kind of works directly with the farm, with the employer through that process. The earlier you can do those things, the better. An adjuster can help see through medical situations or recommend when somebody gets back to work or how to get them back to work. And then at that point, I guess once you report it, it's still kind of following up and documenting with the scene, what went on. How can we make sure that's not going to occur again? And if there's anybody else that was there, having those conversations too, and documenting that. After that, stay engaged. They're your employees, and you guys treat them really well. So keep them engaged too. Let them know that, and check in on them, because happy people are going to come back to work.
Right. A lot of times in claims, I want to try to get that employee back to work to do light work. Yeah. Sometimes you just don't have, a farmer doesn't have light work. You can only push the broom so much to get them back there. So let's have that conversation with the adjuster so they're aware of that. Just a few things that have come to point in my mind when Mike was talking is that throughout the years working workers' comp, seeing these dairies grow, I've seen a lot of things where people would call and say, hey, my employee got hurt today. Should I pay it? What should I do with this? What do I do? It's like, number one, it's legal to pay it. You have to turn in a workers' comp. You have to turn a report within 24 hours. If you don't, they can penalize you for not reporting the claim in time. They're very lenient on that. So I wouldn't make it a habit of not reporting it. And number two is, if you think that you're going to pay this claim and no one's going to know about it, and 3-4 months later, the guy comes back and he's got to have shoulder surgery or back surgery because of this incident that happened. Now you look like a goat because of the fact that, you're going to get in trouble for it, and it's going to have to get turned in because you have substantial dollars of medical cost coverage. So, right. And the other thing is, don't make that your decision to determine if the guy's hurt or not hurt. That has to be done by a professional. So a lot of companies have triages now where you call an 800 number, and basically the employee calls that number. That nurse will ask them questions as far as what happened, how did it happen, and they'll give them some advice as far as treatment goes. They'll follow up the next day. If it's just a headache or aspirin and stuff, it doesn't get reported as a claim. So a lot of people want to avoid reporting claims right away because it's going to go on their experience mod, which is going to affect your premiums down the road. So it's important to call that number that's given to you by the insurance company, get it reported right away. Let them question the employee as far as what happened versus you trying to, get involved in that conversation. That's not your job. That's their job, and it takes you off the hook as far as going forward down the road and having any problems with it. So again, just things that I've seen throughout the years as far as what human nature is going to cause us to do or think or whatever, try to keep it simple and easy, that type of thing. But on the same token, you might have done that when you had 100 cows, but now when you got 10,000 cows, you can't do it.
Right. Thank you both for walking through that. One last question that I have for you guys before we wrap up is we've been hearing talks or seeing lately that farms are getting dropped by insurance companies. So wanted to see if you guys wanted to touch on that a little bit on what you're seeing and what can farmers do or try to do to take the right step in making sure they're always going to be covered.
Yeah, I'll start with that. So basically, throughout the years, every insurance company has to buy reinsurance. If you remember years back, a lot of the older people remember town mutual insurance companies. A lot of those companies have not been able to stay in business because they've had to buy reinsurance. The risks have just gotten too big for them because the risk was bigger than the asset of that town mutual company. So every insurance company is in business is going to have reinsurance. So what happens is when the reinsurance decides they don't want to cover something and that company says we can't do it, then you start seeing companies pull out of business. Or if they start charging higher rates for them, then they just, they stop that line of business. So the farm market is a little bit limited now. There's not a whole lot of insurance companies offering farm insurance, but the key thing is that reinsurance is crucial. We've always had good reinsurance throughout the years. We make sure we keep tab on that. And what's happening in the last few years is we do have a safety inspection where we send someone out to the farm every year and we look at things. An example is fuel tanks. How far should your fuel tanks be from the buildings? In the past, if they were installed properly, they were hooked up with hard wiring, that type of thing, we were okay with it. Going forward, reinsurance says you need to make sure they're 40 feet from the buildings and they have to be hardwired or else. So we as a company are going out saying, these are the things we need to have you take care of so that we can keep in business and insure you. A lot of them are pushing back. Well, I never do in the past. Well, I tell them, it's like, here's the deal. We have to follow the restrictions. And if they're going to enforce it on us, what it's going to do for you is help keep your rates in control in the future because they're going to give us a better rate because we're telling them you're doing what we're asking you to do. So from a reinsurance standpoint, that's a huge thing. And that's why you're seeing that a lot of insurance companies are pulling out because reinsurance is pulling back on it. And it's not just because of Wisconsin claims, farm claims, it's because of all of the hurricanes, all the flooding, all the things across the country. Reinsurance companies, not a lot of them, but they insure all that stuff. And it gets passed back to all of us individuals, whether it's pennies, dimes, nickels, or a lot of money. That's how that works. So, I mean, hopefully it stabilizes in the future. You're going to see a lot more commercial companies get into the business, which basically they do large factories, that type of thing. They're going to try to get in the farm market. Can you put a factory with a farm type thing? Is that the same thing? So a lot's going to evolve over the next few years. Fortunately, I'm retiring, so I won't be part of it, but the future is for these guys over here to take care of it. But anyway, that's a situation with non-renewals coming out, and there's still options out there. But companies that are still taking farms, you're going to have to do what they ask you to do to get coverage.
That makes sense. Awesome.
Might get something.
Yeah, no, I think that's it's a point of contention, right? So Mike said it, and I'll say it again. It's really hard to tell a farmer, hey, this fuel tank's got to go. It's been there for a long time, and now we got to put explosion-proof wiring on it. We got to do this and that. I guess from us, it's hard to have that conversation, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that farm insurance is as affordable as it can be. So give us an opportunity to make sure we can still insure you. So we've got as many insurers as there are possible. Last thing that anybody wants is we're down to 2 people who can offer insurance,
right? And
then competition's out the window. So I think you're always going to have ebbs and flows of that. And we're definitely ebbing towards one direction right now. So reinsurance is a big thing. Every carrier is going to have different rules and regulations they can go by. Some of them say, hey, your total insured value of this farm is simply too big for us. We can't take you any longer. We've seen some of that, and we've seen some, the roof on these buildings is X date old. Either we're just not insuring it anymore, or we're going to take some coverage, basically some coverages away from certain buildings and certain risks. So it's something that's evolving, and we're at the same time trying to figure out where that's going to end up too. So
just a quick comment on that. You talked about roofs, these big freestyle buildings with these big roofs that are probably, at 3 football fields wide or whatever. if there's hail damage that comes down and the roof is damaged by the hail, cosmetic damage is not going to be covered anymore. Unless you want to buy that, it's an expensive endorsement to buy it, but they're not going to pay to take the holes up, the dings out of your roof. It has to be damaged that it leaks. So it's interesting.
Well, thank you guys both for all the insights you shared today. I know I definitely learned a lot, so I hope our audience did as well. Any final thoughts from you guys?
No, I guess basically from my standpoint, it's been a great run for me. I'm not done yet. I got a year left. I'm mentoring these guys to take it over, but after that, I can walk away from it and say I've done a good job and I did the best I could. But again, to see the industry evolve as much as it has, Breakfast on the Farm in Fond du Lac County, all the counties have Breakfast on the Farm. To see all these city people come out, it's education. We need to keep promoting that, and I'll continue doing that going forward. But God bless all you farmers. You guys do a great job, and continue with your growth and success. And that's it. Thanks.
Yeah, awesome. I'll say amen to that. And I don't know if I can. Mike's got big shoes to fill, but I'll try my darndest to fill them up and continue on with the great work he's done.
They're all doing a great job here, so we're good. Thank you much.
Thank you both so much for all the work that you do protecting our farmers. It's not an easy job, so thank you both. And with that, we will wrap up here. But thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you next time on the Dairy Signal.
Thank you.